So let's continue. Here he's talking strictly about the critic, so it's pretty negative. So just critic negative. So I would say, yeah, critic negative. And then here's critic negative. He's not really talking about the writer. Here he goes. He says some critics started out as authors, and they proved that they're terrible at both. But I think he first was saying that some at first for wits, then poets passed. I think he might have been saying that first they were writers and then they became critics. They were like decent writers, and then they became critics, and then they were proven to be fools. I don't know how common that is. I'm sure there's multiple career paths. That's what happens. But I mean, if you're a decent, respected author, I don't know. Why would you go into criticism? I don't know. I'm not knocking critics. Believe me, this is just stream of consciousness here. But I think that's what he's trying to say. So I like to try to like put it in my brain, so I can truly figure it out. And then if I can't, like I said, if I don't have 100% understanding, then I'll skip that passage and I'll quote something else. So critic negative. So yeah, this is critic negative. And we might just delete the critic negative ones, because we want to, our thesis, it all goes back to the thesis, right? He's talking about maligning the critic much more than the writer. So if we can put the critic and the writer in the same line, in the same stanza, all peppered out throughout our essay, it stands, it's a stronger essay, stronger argument. And disclaimer is that, maybe I'm missing something massive. I'm not saying that, these essays are going to be world changing, amazing. Maybe I wouldn't even have gotten into any graduate programs for English or criticism. But this got me through. This got me through, and I did well. But there are, you have to make decisions, and that's the most important thing when it comes to writing. Is you can only do what you can do, and you only know what you know. And so that's why you got to keep reading, keep growing, keep listening, keep paying attention, keep tweaking, keep evolving. But yeah, I mean this is my analysis. I truly believe that these quotes probably aren't as strong as these, because I do believe this thesis. I've read this poem numerous times, and I think he does malign the critic much more harshly than the writer. Just the same way as in Paradise Lost. If I was to make a, you know, my initial response when I read Paradise Lost, this was years ago, but I remember emotionally reacting, thinking, "Wow, uh, um, Milton presents Chaucer, not Chaucer, excuse me, Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Milton presents Satan as like more interesting and dynamic than God in this piece. It doesn't mean that was his opinion. It doesn't mean that was his religious belief. It just means that that's what I perceived as the reader. And maybe that comes from, my cultural background. Maybe if there's a different, someone else reading it, and that's what makes literature so interesting. So maybe in my conclusion, I would have commented on that, that, maybe America, because it's so individual and individualistic and very action oriented, and, I don't know, I could have made some societal argument, or some subjective argument, or some argument about contemporary modern day Western life or Western culture. Um, you know, but so yeah, so with this, yeah, my decision is that, you know, I think that he is speaking more harshly about the critic than the writer, and so we're using these quotes. I will probably delete those, just the critic negative ones, Um, Even this one, this is really good. So I might even, so this is critic negative, like times 10. I mean, it's just these half-learned witlings, numerous in our aisle. He's saying they're everywhere. Bad critics are just all over the place. He's saying, I think. Their generation is so equivocal. To tell them when 100 tongues require, 100 people would have to tell them for them to understand it. Or one vain wits that might 100 tire, like, or maybe one of them might uh, annoy 100 people and get 100 um, writers exhausted. I think that's what that means. Or one vain wits that might 100 tire. So it's being tired. So maybe they, um, but yeah, that's why I put that in bracket because I'm not exactly sure what that line is. But I know that it means something a lot. He's being very condescending. He's talking smack. So, but you seek to give merit and fame, and then even here again, it's long. So I'm not a huge fan of it because it's long. It would take us like a full page to like, seemingly a page to like unpack and comment on these different words. And I mean, it's a great piece of the stanza, but we might not have enough room. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We already have 4. That's 2 pages, right? Half a page each, approximately, plus a half a page for the intro, half a page for the conclusion. So you're at about 3 pages approximately. So who knows? Maybe we'll keep these. All right. So wit and judgment are often at strife. I love this. So this is a quote that we might use because it's taking a photo of both of them at the same time. So author and critic. So like man and wife. So this is +2 because he's not like saying, "Oh, women are below men." He's not saying any of that in this line. I don't get that in this line. But I think that he's saying, though men to each other's aid like man and wife, which that might connect man with wit, man with writer, wife with judgment, with critic. I don't think he's being misogynistic at all here. I just think that it's a little bit of a +2 because of how he's structuring it. And if I was to pull this out of that particular time, the Enlightenment time, yeah, I could talk a lot about that. And in film class, I did that a lot. I was because a lot of times that was what we were assigned. We were supposed to take them out of a social societal context, um, and and in terms of I think you have to commit though. So if we're going to commit, then we have to really sprinkle society in the thesis and in the body of the essay, in the arguments, and and then the conclusion, obviously. Or we can try to keep that out, keep the societal references out completely, and then maybe wrap it up in the conclusion, where you might have some conclusive, make some conclusive points, conclusive epiphanies that sort of respond to your thesis. You have your thesis, you argue it, and then in the conclusion, you want to open it up a little bit. You want to say, okay, well, this thesis makes sense because of X, Y, and Z. You want to zoom in. Generally, you want to zoom in or zoom out, right? So maybe talk about overall society, etc. In your conclusion. But again, it all has to point to the thesis. All of your points, all of your defending comments, quotes, all of it. Even if something's great, but it doesn't fit your thesis, either tweak your thesis so it fits, and it's not too obnoxious as a thesis, or you got to cut it out. You can't put it in your essay. It's extraneous. It actually weakens your essay. Even if it's a great paragraph, it weakens your essay. And if you do it once, it might not affect your grade. Your teacher might give you a pass. If you do it 2 or 3 times or more, guarantee you it's going to affect your grade. If you literally put paragraph after paragraph that does not support your thesis, it will have a negative effect on your grade. So that's why this process, even though it's sort of long and laborious, it's worth it because it keeps you in line. It keeps you on the right track, and just really making sure that you set everything up, you line everything up, so that your first draft is not as difficult to write, and then also your future drafts aren't as difficult to write, or your edits don't have to be as thorough because your first draft you've done the heavy work. Like most of it is there, and you just have to make some small tweaks. Different people write different ways, though. I mean, I'll tell you, there are some people that you know might make videos bashing these videos and saying, "Oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about." Um, I don't know, but or maybe I'll just be in some remote corner of the internet, and and but regardless, for people that are interested, um, this is my process. It's worked really well for me. I did really well, and this is the process that I would use. So a perfect judge, same spirit, find, and then here he's giving a recipe to be a great critic. So this is sort of critic help. He's sort of giving critic help. So it's kind of outside the thesis, but not exactly. Let's look again. Rhyming word choice maligns the critic. So maybe if we wanted to add to this thesis, we could add that he gives a recipe for being great critic. So maybe we also, as the writer, show a little love to the critic. Maybe here we include in the thesis sort of an acknowledgement that, you know what, he's really tough on the critic, but he also gives them a recipe to be a great critic. And then it doesn't come off as us just bashing the critic. It dimensionalizes our writing a little bit, dimensionalizes our tone a little bit. It just dimensionalizes it a little bit. And it also shows, I mean, this is such a long poem, and obviously someone like Alexander Pope, he's going to be nuanced. I mean, he's not going to say the same thing over and over and over again. I mean, these guys are the greats for a reason. And yes, they do a lot of times repeat very similar sentiments in different words. But a lot of times, those different words, they're 90% similar, right? So he might choose a different word, and that might be a double entendre that unpacks more meaning. So even though he's saying sort of the same thing, it's not always, it's rarely exactly the same thing. He's not doing it just because he's just like, oh, I want to add more lines to this poem. Generally, there are multiple layers of why a poet, such as these superlative poets that are respected, in the canon, etc. Why they repeat themselves, why they seem to repeat themselves in some of these lines. So, I mean, Alexander Pope does not need me to defend his writing, so that's neither here nor there. But yeah, okay. So let's see. And then we'll go to let's do whoever thinks I'll follow this piece to C. Yeah, and then here's a plus. Here's sort of I'll call this a +3, because even in his essay writing, or even when he's only talking about the critic and giving the recipe for how to write, he's still saying, look, you bad critics are expecting perfection, and that's the huge mistake. So he's kind of bashing critics, and then also he's saying what never was, never is, or never shall be. Like, he's really pouring on thick. He's like, it's like someone saying, I would never, it's like that line in I don't know why I think of these classic movies, probably because I've seen them like 20 times when I was younger, but I saw this movie Dumb and Dumber, and he's like, would you marry me? And she goes, I wouldn't marry you in a million years. And he's like, so you're saying there's a chance? And it's like the same thing here. It's like he's saying, you'll never see a perfect piece of writing in a million years. Like, he's just pouring on thick. And yeah, so he's really, being harsh to the critic here. But, and then he exalts the author a little bit. He's saying, look, in every work, regard the writer's end. So the end could mean the end, what they mean, what their goal is, what their mission is with writing this, but also like the end of the poem, the end of the book, and then looking back once you're at the end, looking back at all of the story and the layers and like what the author meant. So in every work regard the writer's end, since none can compass, right? Can compass like the compass, the which tells you what direction you're going, and also encompass. It can also sort of imply encompass. None can encompass, since none can compass, and it's a little bit of alliteration there. Can compass more than they intend. Than they being the writer. Writer's end, they intend. Um, so those are very well connected. Writer's end, they intend. Um, and then it's sort of exalting the author. It's saying, basically saying that, look, your criticism can never can never be better than the author's. He's kind of saying that. I don't know if he's actually saying that. I wouldn't argue that because I'm not positive he's saying that exact thing in this specific line. But I'm sure you guys can agree that he's exalting the author here. He's saying that none can compass more than they intend. Like he's sort of talking down the critic a bit. And if the means be just, the conduct true, applause in spite of trivial faults is due. And if conduct means, I think he's saying, if the writing is good and if it's quality, I don't think he means like the conduct of the author, like how the author behaves when he's in your office or something. I think it's more like, and if it's good writing and if it's dispensed in a normal manner, and I think that's sort of what he's implying. But he's saying applause, in spite of trivial faults is due. Like write a good review, just because it's not perfect. Write a good review. And that's another thing is that what I learned over the years is that these guys are that they're trying to be accessible, and they're pretty accessible. It's not like I think that a lot of folks might look at poetry and say, this is just another language. It's not even. They're just being elitist for the sake of being elitist, and yeah, that's arguable. That poetry is kind of elitist. What does that mean, though, right? But it's like the greats are they're poetic, yeah, but they make sense. Like you can take the words, and it's just like anything, right? It's like programming or math. It's like it's practice. The more you practice, the better you are going to get. I mean, it's a fact. It's going to happen, and like it's all about the pace and and making good decisions and all that stuff. But so just really look at this as there's a reason why you guys are reading this stuff, why this stuff shows up in college classes, high school classes, etc. It's because if millions and millions of students have to read this in 6th grade or 8th grade or college or whatever, there's probably a reason. There's probably a reason, and that means that that it's accessible enough. They're not gonna stick 30 students or 300 students into a class and have you read something that's so inaccessible that they're gonna get 300 terrible essays back, and there's just no way in, and it's just this wall of this wall of like Babel, this Tower of Babel, where there's just no, there's gonna be some level of accessibility there because it's on the list. And I'm not going to defend or refute the canon or whatever. I'm not going to get into any of that stuff right now. I'm just talking about the accessibility of the writing and just having a good attitude when you're like, okay, let me see what these lines are all about. So true wit is nature to advantage dressed. So true wit is nature to advantage dressed. Well, what has he been talking about? He's been talking about a faultless piece, a faultless story, a faultless book, a faultless poem. True wit is nature to advantage dress. Okay, so true wit to advantage, right? It gives an advantage to nature. So it's like nature plus an advantage because of what you've created. right? It's like a spaceship. It's like a spaceship or an airplane. But yeah, that's more engineering. But in terms of writing, he's saying that writing is nature, but it's trying to dress it in better clothes, in an advantage. Okay, so this is what that line is, I think, trying to say. What oft was thought, but never so well expressed. Okay, so it's something was often thought, like an idea that was thought, or a way that they picked the words, or a paragraph or a characterization or whatever, but never so well expressed. Okay, cool. So this person does it better than anyone else. Superlative language speaking well of great authors. So this is plus. I think this is plus. I don't know. +5, +10. So +5 author. Doesn't talk about the critic though. So maybe we won't be able to put that in, which kind of stinks. Because those are great quotes. So +3. Yeah. So the ones we have just numbers for, those are the ones where he talks about the critic and the author in the same one. So let's do 0 here. And this is so this is critic negative. Some valuing those of their own side or mind. And it might have been easier. It all depends on how much time you have, right? And multiple things are at stake here. How much time you have, if you think you're gonna earn a good grade, if you do the same structure. If the last two essays were chronologically ordered, then this one it probably shouldn't be. I mean, just in general. I don't know, but it depends on if a lot of it depends. I mean, how competitive you want to be. How high are the odds? Do you think that you'll be? Maybe you bring the first draft to, with the chronology order. Bring that to your teacher a couple days early, or a week early, or a day early. And have them take a look at it if they're open to it. Then you sort of see if they even care about that. I mean, maybe they won't care about it. Maybe you can just keep writing. They're like, I don't care what the structure is. If it's similar structure every time, um, I just want you to do a very, very good job on the thesis and the supporting, and see, it all depends, right? It all depends. So, but I want to take a little bit of a risk, and it's going to take a little bit more time. So I want to see if we can mix it up a little bit and see if we don't, and we still might end up going in order. But this is just a way to categorize. Categorizing is so important when you're doing outlines. You have to figure out, what are you categorizing? Why are you categorizing it? And then you make the decision. Like, oh, this is +3, +2. I'm going to do numbers, and I'm going to, so this is +5. Author, critic negative, doesn't talk about the author. So value themselves. And then again, this is still critic negative. And then shaming language, bullying, critic negative. This seems like, it's not super heavy, but he says it, public faction doubles private aid. You rebuke someone's writing or someone publicly, they're probably going to hate you. So don't get mad if something happens. Like, he's kind of implying that, like, don't get mad. Like, private hate sucks. It could have an effect on you. I'm not saying nothing like that. If we can find a way to put that in, it's shaming. It's sort of shaming. So to err is human, to forgive divine. So this can be our intro conclusion quote. Find a way to put it in. We might even open with that quote. Perhaps the most popular line in Alexander Pope's an essay on criticism is You know, to err is human, to forgive divine. And critics will hopefully forgive him because and maybe you'll talk about that in the intro or maybe the conclusion once you wrap it all up and you say, the critics should, Alexander Pope mentions, to err is human, to forgive divine. Hopefully the critic forgives him for all the bashing, all the smack talk. So that might be a part of the conclusion, a part of the funny, interesting, quippy point. Not some grand epiphany, but it's still sort of an interesting, quippy point to make in the conclusion, or the intro. So, all right. So then at the end here, yeah, this is our last one. So these monstrous critics with your darts engage, and then just critics. Bash. Bash. Bashes them. So here's where he's bashing them. So we'll marinate on this for a little bit, and then we will come back and we will figure out, or maybe we will already have figured out exactly after looking this over and exactly which quotes we want to leave out and leave in. Also, let's count the number of quotes that we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's a long one. That 7th is a long one. 8, 9, 10. That's long. No. Yeah. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. We have 15. That's 7 pages minimum. Minimum. Probably closer to 10, but it's 7 pages, half a page. They usually end up being like 3/4 of a page because sometimes you have to break up one quote or one few lines into 2 or 3 paragraphs. So it probably ends up being 3/4 of a page on average. But we have 15. Let's try to do like half of that. Let's try to do like 8. I think 8 quotes is a lot for a good essay. 8-pager approximately. 8 quotes. I think it'll end up being around 8 pages. Eight quotes. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. See you next time.